Good day to you all and welcome to the Algeria British Business Council Ambassadorial Webinar. I'm Olga Maitland, I'm the chairman of the ABBC. Over the 16 years since it was founded, I've had the pleasure to watch Algeria develop, recover its soul from the dark days of the Civil War in the 1990s, and blessed by a bright and energetic new generation, there is every confidence that they will achieve the future they have worked so hard and strived so hard for. Throughout the centuries, the British have been a friend of Algeria. It began in the Roman times. That's another story. But today, the links between the two countries has never been better. In recent years, the ABBC has hosted roundtable dinners at my home in London with both the British ambassador and the Algerian ambassador of the day. The briefings were popular and friendships developed. So to make up for that, we are going virtual to reach our many friends of all sectors who are keen to maintain their links with the country. Today, we are honored to host His Excellency, the British Ambassador to Algeria, Mr. Lowen. And in his time he's been in Algeria, he has made many friends, speaks both Arabic and French, and has a deep understanding of the dynamics and challenges that the country faces. Mr. Lowen, as you will discover, has an instinct for positive action and understanding both the government and the economic challenges it faces. His mission has always been clear. Britain is there for you as a friend, but also as a partner as the country moves ahead. After the ambassador has spoken, I will invite Mr. Yassine Bouhara to make some remarks and give a perspective from Algeria. Mr. Bouhara, chairman and founder of the TEL Group and Investment Fund, understands the needs from both his country and also of the many foreign investors who wish to participate in the growth of Algeria. I should also add that Mr. Bouhara is on the advisory board of the ABBC. But first, no ABBC event is complete without the presence and participation of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's trade envoy to Algeria, the Right Honourable Lord Risby of Haverhill. Lord Risby knows the country well. He's visited many times and developed good relations with the government and its ministers. He has travelled the length and breadth of the country and has a deep empathy for Algeria and its culture. He is such a regular visitor to the residence, there is now a guest room named after him. It is therefore with the very greatest of pleasure that I invite our good friend Lord Risby to open the ABBC Ambassadorial Webinar. Over to you, Lord Risby.
Well, thank you very much, Olga, for your introduction. And I just am delighted that the ABBC is having this event, which comes at a very important time. We're in the midst of this pandemic, but we are seeking to look beyond this stage. And as you correctly say, we have an absolutely excellent relationship. And of course, I consider, as the trade envoy to Algeria, Algeria to be my second home. So it's always excellent. I just wanted to say something in a more general way. I had the great pleasure and privilege of having a long conversation this morning with His Excellency, the Algerian ambassador in London. We talked about foreign policy, etc. And I just wanted to say something about Algeria in this context, because there are very few countries in the world that work so hard on their bilateral relationships right across Africa, the Middle East in particular. And I just wanted to highlight something which I think all of us must acknowledge and praise. That is, immediately after this terrible event happened in Beirut, the Algerians were there sending doctors, medical equipment to support without making a fuss about it in their normal, understated and very efficient way. And I think we all should acknowledge what they have done at this very difficult time for Lebanon. But just looking back on this year, despite this terrible virus, we have had a whole series of events which strengthen our bilateral relationship. We had, of course, a milestone event in January, the Africa Investment Summit, which took place in London with Algerian participation, of course. This was not only an important milestone in our relationships with Africa, but of course with Algeria, the biggest country in Africa. And that was followed by a very successful technology forum, and indeed, subsequent to that, an extremely well-attended UK trade mission to Algeria, all of which we can count as a considerable success. And in the context of Britain, of course, we've technically left the European Union, but we are in the transition stage, and that is the basis for discussions with our friends as to how we deal with trade in this period. And I'm delighted that a video conference took place between two key ministers from both countries to see how we can take this matter forward. And indeed, that is actually happening with a high-level task force that has been put in place to actually smooth the process of further developing our business and economic relationships. And that is to be very welcome. Now, what I also wanted to say is that I'm very, very keen, obviously, to revisit Algeria as soon as possible. But what this terrible period has actually revealed is the absolute fundamental importance of technology. I'm a parliamentarian, and I have been working with a virtual parliament. And what is so exciting about Algeria is that people grasp, they are dynamic entrepreneurs who I've met, deputy minister, all of that, making it clear that they know that the knowledge economy is something that they want to deal with and we can help them with. We want to share our experience here in Britain with our friends in Algeria in terms of developing the knowledge economy. So we will be taking that forward in the future. And I just wanted to say this, we all learn lessons from events. Britain went through a stage of being rather dependent on the financial sector. And of course, Algeria has to deal with the fact that it will be diversifying. There is no doubt about it, away from energy. And we want to share in what I know is going to be a good outcome and prosperity for that country, building on our excellent bilateral relationship, of which you, Olga, and your organization play such an important part. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words in this opening moment.
Well, thank you, Lord Risby. If you have time and can stay with us, we would love you to chip in with some comments.
Of course.
We would really appreciate that. So now I have the very greatest of pleasure to invite His Excellency, the British Ambassador to Algeria, Mr. Barry Lowen.
Lady Olga, thank you very much for those kind words and for convening this webinar. I think we've got even more people involved than you managed to fit around your dinner table at your house. I don't quite know if that's true, but it's great to have so many participants. And I see many familiar names. And so I very much hope this will be a round table and that people will contribute their suggestions, their comments, as well as questions. So I look forward to the discussion. And can I say a big thank you to you and to the ABBC for all you do to promote the trade and investment relationship between our two countries. And I firmly believe that business is a force for good for both the UK and Algeria, and for the win-win partnership between us. And thank you for everything you do to promote that. As you said, it's a very, very long relationship. The first British consul came to Algiers in 1580 at the request of Elizabethan merchants to support business. And I'm delighted to say that remains a very top priority for the embassy, is to continue to support business, to do business. I named one of the bedrooms in the residence after that first consul, John Tipton. As you say, we named another one after Lord Risby, a bigger and grander bedroom, of course. And can I also just take this opportunity to express my gratitude to you, Lord Risby, for all you do to develop the trade and investment relationship between us. I think you'd have been on your 20th visit by now, if it hadn't been for COVID. And I know our many Algerian friends are looking forward to your next visit when that becomes possible. I have to say, I think it's impossible to know when a visit will be organised, when commercial flights reopen, given the COVID situation. But I'm optimistic. The daily total of cases is beginning to fall, and this weekend we're going to see the gradual relaxation of some of the measures like curfew, the reopening of restaurants, some mosques. So I think we can be hopeful, but it's clearly a challenge for all countries to find the balance in dealing with COVID. I thought I'd start, because I'm conscious that as well as familiar names on the call, there are some possibly people who are new to Algeria. So I thought I'd start by recalling a few key facts about Algeria that's worth, I think, bearing in mind. The first is that it's nearer than many people think. I think it's our nearest non-EU capital to London, normally a 2.5-hour flight. And I think that's particularly worth highlighting in this era of where many companies are considering nearshoring production closer to UK and European markets, and that supply chains are shortening, becoming more resilient. And we've had inquiries from British companies looking to nearshore production from Asia to this region. So I think that proximity is worth bearing in mind. And at the same time, Algeria is well positioned to develop as a gateway to Africa. Second point I think worth highlighting is that Algeria is perhaps richer than many people think. It's a middle income country, GDP of about $4,000 per person. So it's a significant market in its own right, has something like $60 billion in foreign exchange reserves, next to no foreign debt. Again, thinking about COVID, there's clearly been an economic hit, as pretty well everywhere. Relatively few deaths, although any one is of course tragic, and the medical services are coping. But there has been an economic hit. There's also been a hit from the decline in oil prices. And in response, the government has reduced its expenditure, it's reduced energy subsidies, it's reducing imports. And there's an important conference coming up, I think it's on the 15th and 16th of August, that the government is holding with business and social partners to consider the economic future, sort of relaunch of the economy. I think that will be really interesting to watch how the government's plans develop following that conference. Another point to remind ourselves is that Algeria is perhaps bigger than many people think, 43 million people. And those people are both well educated. It's got one of the highest human development indexes in Africa. They're increasingly speaking English. We're looking forward to the opening of the first British school in the autumn, but there's lots of English language teaching going on as well. And it's a very young population. I think something like 2/3 under 30. That population is tech savvy. It's, I mean, Lord Risby touched on the importance of technology. It's tech savvy, it's digitally connected, it's on the move with a lot of developing entrepreneurialism. And those people are demanding change. And we saw that with the Iraq protest movement over the last year or so. Worth highlighting that that was overwhelmingly peaceful, as was the response, that it's resulted in some change, and that the new government is responding to that demand for change with an ambitious programme of reform. And that is both political reform, and so there's a new draft or draft new constitution currently out for public consultation, really complicated by COVID, but a referendum planned for the autumn on that. And then economically, a clear aim to, again, as Lord Risby touched on, a clear aim to reduce dependency on hydrocarbons to 20% of GDP by diversifying the economy, a strong encouragement for entrepreneurialism with new dedicated ministers for SMEs, for startups, a commitment to energy transition, again with a new dedicated minister for energy transition and renewables, another one for developing the pharmaceutical sector. So a very clear response to take forward economic reform and diversification, and an ambition, again, as Lord Risby touched on, to develop a tech-based knowledge economy. And we've seen already moves in practice to deliver that, with the relaxation of the 51-49% rule on shareholding for all but strategic sectors, the cancellation of the right of preemption, the introduction of the new hydrocarbons law, and other measures aiming to enable a more commercially viable business environment for foreign investors. We've seen a very strong drive to tackle corruption. And we hear very clearly from Algerian ministers their understanding of the need to do more to promote transparency, to reduce bureaucracy, to promote digitization in the economy. And so I mentioned the meeting coming up in a week or so that I think could be very interesting in terms of the future plans. So looking at the opportunities, I think this programme of economic diversification plays to UK strengths. I think there's a real complementarity in our capabilities. And so in energy transition, the UK leads the way in green technology, in promoting and in integrating renewable energy, education, life sciences, agriculture. We're a very strong effort here to develop the agricultural sector, tourism, manufacturing, touched on the scope for nearshoring, cybersecurity, financial and professional services, insurance, for example. And then again, as Lord Risby touched on, and really to highlight, the scope to develop partnership in technology, fintech, edtech, biotech, agri-tech. You get the idea, pretty much every sort of tech. But, and I think there's bound to be buts in any market. You know, business is always has challenges, and I think clearly there's the current challenges around COVID. The borders closed, no commercial flights. There's an ongoing discussion on our trade arrangements, our bilateral trade arrangements at the end of or after the transition period finishes. It's in that context, actually, it's interesting to note that there's a review underway. Algeria is conducting a review of its trade agreements, and specifically of the current EU association agreement. And that this determination to change, I think, is work in progress, that there's still more to do, as Algerian ministers acknowledge. But a business leader this week actually made the point to me that this determination to change, it represents a fresh start. And that process of catching up, if you like, will open opportunities. And we hear from business that, yes, there are challenges, but there are also higher rewards than elsewhere. So I think a real opportunity. Can I close by making three plugs? First plug is that we plan some further webinars, following your lead, Lady Olga, further webinars about specific areas of opportunity. So energy transition, healthcare, which I can expand on if that would be of interest, education, particularly around ELT and vocational management training. And we're very open to suggestions on further areas where people would welcome that sort of webinar to go through in more detail areas of opportunity. Second plug is for UK Export Finance, which has £3 billion of cover available to support bilateral business. And then my final plug is for my Department for International Trade team here and indeed across the region. We are here to help with information about opportunities, with introductions, and with help for market access barriers. So please do use us to help you to do more business. Thank you, Lady Olga.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. And of course, when you come on stream, there's always more work to be done. I absolutely agree with you that we will do some more sector-specific webinars in time to come. And I'm very encouraged by your general overview from your perspective about how things are moving forward. So we will go into more detail later. But I now have great pleasure of introducing Mr. Yassine Bouhara, who is a good friend of us all, the chairman and founder of the TEL Group. And Mr. Bouhara has that unique quality of being able to understand what Algeria wants and needs and can manage, and also how the international community can really respond. So over to you, Mr. Bouhara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lady Olga, and with pleasure, I'll be, or at least I will be trying to answer some of the generic questions. Just as an introduction, it is important for me just to reiterate the fact that the process of transformation of Algeria started in early 2019 in the events and the citizens movements that we call the Hirak. So Algeria is and was already in a phase of transformation, which to some extent is a very positive framework, because as the world is transforming on the wave of the pandemic, Algeria is transformation compatible now. So we have now a process of political and economic reforms that are taking place. Some of them are obviously slowed down by the pandemics, the restriction of traveling, and obviously all the angst and the fear of economic collapse in the world that are being at the highlight of the pandemics of COVID-19. It is interesting to see as well that, and I would just utilize something that just happened, which is the tragedy in Lebanon, which highlight as well the risks of corruption and the weaknesses of civilian infrastructure as a direct result of negligence or potentially corruption or potentially incompetence. That the fight against corruption is now taking a sovereignty/strategic value. And this will most probably and inevitably in a country like Algeria accelerate the move of the reduction of corruption and therefore the improvement of doing business in general. I'm not going to reiterate all the trends that was expressed by His Excellency Barry Lowen. I think he did a very good job in painting the entire picture on all the sectors. But the way I look at the pandemics and the post-pandemic situation is that everything is just accelerating. All the trends that were already there are just accelerating at a speed that is that is very fast. And then the question for us is, what is the positioning in Algeria? And more concretely for people that are part of the webinar that are interested to invest in Algeria, how can I take opportunity of the current situation and how do I invest in Algeria? And I'm going to try to answer to the generic questions that I normally receive as we advise investors across the world. Primarily. So number one, on the 4951 question, as everybody knows, Algeria has implemented the 4951 rule in 2009. It was on the wave of the economic crisis of 2008. I'm not going to go into the reasons why it was implemented, but it was perceived being a hurdle. Now, the new law of finance that have been released this year has now lightened the 4951 rule and reduced it to something that is defined as strategic. We can go into a very long debate of trying to define what is strategic, what is not strategic, will this be allowed or not. My view is the law is there. The administration is not yet ready to execute all the processes, but I can guarantee you that if an investor comes with a project of investment that is clearly defined and put it down forward for an investment, there is the possibility to invest 100%. Yes. So there is no restriction of doing it, but there is a difference between asking the conceptual question and putting down a concrete creation of company at 100. If someone wants to create a company, owns 100% by a non-Algerian / non-resident, it is possible to do as of today. Yes, not that it was, that it is something that has already taken place in scale, primarily due to traveling restriction. In Algeria, it's not possible to remotely create a company. Yes, so you have to be on the ground. Now, is it possible to give a procurer to a person via one of the Algerian diplomatic representation, that one of you potential representative in Algeria creates the company in your behalf? Yes, that's possible. But the reason why we haven't seen yet a development is primarily due to the restriction of physical traveling. And so that is one inclination. A lot of investors ask me here that soon or potentially it will be possible to do foreign debt. Yes, so to basically borrow money abroad. Number one, as an advisor and as an investor in a country where potentially over time the currency may devaluate, I don't see why you will borrow money in foreign currency for a project in Algeria. That is my view. I don't think that would be the most appropriate thing to do. If you can borrow Algerian dinars and create debt in dinars at spreads of rates that are reasonable, it is better to borrow in domestic currency for your local project. Nevertheless, it is now a possibility, but that's subject to the central bank authorization. So again, in the same fashion as I've mentioned for the 4951, there is no automatic process of being able to borrow money abroad. But if as part of a project, there is some potential financing that is required to be done in foreign currency, yes, the legal framework now authorized to consider it, yes. It is a very big change because prior to this, that was not possible. And this is something that you need to keep in mind. Nevertheless, it is clear as well from the authorities that the recourse to foreign debt for domestic project is primarily, and that's the opposite of 4951, designed for strategic project, and I'm more thinking infrastructure, strategic implementation and project finance in general. So that is for what is related to potential foreign debt. The question is, again, as well from our investors, is how do I provide advisory services from abroad? I mean, all the messages from the government is clearly favorizing domestic providers. There is not punitive, but hurdle taxation of foreign advisory services in Algeria. And it's very easy to counterbalance. First, you have a talent pool in Algeria of dynamic and young people that are more than eager to participate to advisory type activities. And my advice for people who on the long run want to provide advisory businesses in Algeria and generic services is please implement yourself on the ground. If you create a subsidiary in Algeria and know that you can do it at 100%, set up a domestic entity, recruit some local people, and then a part of the services that you provide from abroad will be authorized for foreign currency repatriation as part of, matrix of services, but have some of the services being provided from Algeria. And that is, number one, logically better to be closer to your clients, better in the way that you demonstrate support to the local economies, demonstrate proximity, but more importantly as well, you create jobs, and you'll understand better the marketplace. So my advice for anybody who wants to provide generic services to Algeria, open a subsidiary on the ground, and you know what, that's, I would say, more or less the norm in the world. So trying to do a business case, traveling services is not a solution that is going to work on the long run. And I would say it is not the favorized process that is recommended at this stage. It is true as well, and I'm requested questions around, how do we participate to tenders? Tenders in Algeria are relatively open. It's very easy to have access to tenders. You go to a site of the Ministry of Industry or Energy, you will find all kinds of tenders, Ministry of Commerce, and so on. It is true that you have to pay for it, so that's a little bit painful. Some people complain about the fact that there is a cost associated with taking a tender, but to be honest as well, the cost itself is relatively marginal. We're not talking a substantial amount of money, and it remains within the acceptable framework. It is possible as well to get access to tenders in the diplomatic representations across the world. So if you go to an Algerian consulate or an embassy, it's possible to have access to tenders through this medium, and they tend to be easily available. Yes, but it is true that on the ground, you will need to get a dedicated person to collect this tender. Now, there is plenty of consultants, associations, commercial chambers, and lawyers that will be more than happy to provide you the services if you require. And I don't think that this is a substantial hurdle, and it is not unlike any. A lot of questions as well that I get relate to renewable energy. As you know, Algeria has deployed a plan of 23 gigawatt of deployment of renewable energy. Algeria is a credible player in the energy sector. For the one who don't know, the Sonatrach, which is the Algerian oil and gas company, is the largest corporate of Africa. It is in the top 10 energy consortium of the planet. And Algeria has some flaws in some activities across the economic spectrum, but Algeria knows how to extract and distribute energy. And therefore, the credibility of the country in deploying renewable energy is very different process than for a country that imports energy. This is to diversify the mix, yes, to answer to domestic demand, and to diminish the dependency to fossil type energies. Since 2015, we went through several waves of tenders that were supposed to be deployed. It is true that it is delayed. The government seems to be committed to renewable energy. We are all waiting for this to happen. I urge people to be patient. Things will ultimately emerge, but the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down some of these processes. Nevertheless, a lot of work has been done around the renewable energy development, primarily around the photovoltaic opportunity. And I think that, as some people are abandoning the ambition to participate to this program, I think that this is most probably the best timing to look at it. Yes, I know that some people have been frustrated, they've been waiting several years for this to take place, but it will take place. Notably as well, Algeria has set up a Ministry of Mines. So mines used to be either attached to energy, the Energy Ministry, or was attached to the Industry Ministry. So it was some sort of like a, abandoned child of the Algerian economy. Now we have a Ministry of Mining now. Algeria has substantial opportunity in the mining sector, notably phosphate, iron, plenty of different type of minerals, going from zinc to even construction materials, marble, and other type of structure. It has been neglected, I have to acknowledge, but I believe that it will be some new opportunities to participate to the mining industry. Algeria has a unique opportunity in mining because not unlike other African countries that have massive potential mineral deposits, Algeria has the infrastructure and the energy associated with leveraging these mineral deposits, and that's what makes the difference. And I believe that there is their potential opportunity. So how can you invest in Algeria? Like, His Excellency Barry Lowen gave an entire inclination of sectors that are viable. Greenfield is an easy possibility. It's relatively easy to set up a company in Algeria, I urge people just to make a move, just give it a shot, create the companies, make the proposal, and you will be most probably surprised by the responsiveness of the authorities, and not that they are submerged with demands at the moment. The second is the COVID-19 and the Iraq prior to this, and the fact that there is a reform of the banking sector has created some, issues with some investors that have developed industrial base or other type of structure, and there is a lot of brownfield entities to acquire. So unfinished factories, project that are 90% done, relatively good project. If some of you are interested, they can contact the ABBC, and we will be more than happy to provide some inclinations of where and which sector these opportunities are, but they range from agriculture to generic FMCG, some mining, and some industrial processes that are viable. There is obviously as well some opportunities in joint venture with the public sector. That is a more challenging thing to do. I will strongly advise to do a joint venture with the public sector only if you're a large multinational or a substantial entity. This is not for medium investor scale. And last but not least, there is the development of funds. So what is new in Algeria with the government is that there is not a week where in Algerian newspaper you don't hear about a fund. Yes, that sounds totally normal if you are a UK investor, but that was a foreign word just 4 years ago or 3 years ago. The concept even to set up a fund wasn't there. So there is now opportunities to develop intermediated investment capacity. In Algeria, there is now the development of fund capacity. So Intel Group, we have designed a structure. We've been granted a license to operate as an asset manager on the ground. And we have as well a Maghreb/African private equity entity. We'll be more than happy to talk to investors if they're interested to intermediate their investments to ourselves or other players. We'll be more than happy to introduce. Just to give you a concrete example, a couple of months ago, one player, a Uber lookalike called Temtem, yes, which is one of the domestic players, wanted to raise capital. We successfully structured a vehicle and we finalized a $4 million financing for this entity. And we've done that in less than 2 weeks. So there is an appetite for investors, and for British investors, we like to come into Algeria, and are wondering, shall I get some local partners on the ground? It's always good to have local partners, but if you need local capital, there is plenty of ways to create a vehicle where you could associate your investment with some Algerian investors on the ground that will be financial investors and not operator. I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'm going to monopolize. There is plenty of opportunity, but I would like to finish with this quote. Algeria is in a revolution, in a world in a revolution, so we are perfectly compatible with the transformation that is taking place. Thank you.
Bravo, Yassine. Thank you very much for a very enlightening survey of Algeria and the opportunities. Now, may I come back to His Excellency the Ambassador, because there were many topics that Mr. Bouhara picked up upon, and I'm just really wondering whether you would like to drill down a little bit more on how you see, let's say, renewable energy and mining opportunities are moving forward, and indeed pharma. Let's look at 3 topics. How do you feel about that?
Thanks, Lady Olga, and big thank you to Yassine for such an excellent and detailed presentation. So I think renewables, clearly a big focus. I touched upon the creation of a dedicated minister for energy transition and renewables. We're looking forward to having a meeting with them, and there's already a good platform for discussion about this area of energy transition, of sustainable energy. Clearly, it's a big focus for all of us, particularly the UK, as we head towards COP26 next year. And I think there's a lot of political will behind this transition. So, as always, I think it's a case of identifying what the UK is particularly good at. You know better than me, but my understanding is we're particularly good at integrating energy and integrating project integration. So having a very clear pitch is something we're developing. We've already put in ideas around energy transition to the Algerian government. We've got an MOU between us to help to act as a sort of platform to introduce our expertise on this transition. Mining, very early days yet, and Yassine might have more detail about the opportunities there, but I'm struck by the government's ambition to encourage young Algerians to develop projects in the mining sector. And I suppose that might be an area where there's complementarity, where perhaps UK companies with experience can bring that to a partnership with new young Algerian companies. Similarly, in pharmaceuticals, already a significant capability here, but again, it would be good to see whether there's scope for partnership as that sector develops. I think just to highlight something that Yassine said, which I think was absolutely right, that in this sort of new era with so much change and a sense of a new beginning, I'd encourage people to make a proposal, not necessarily wait for opportunities to emerge, but to come with ideas that we can help to put to Algerian partners and government. So you know, I think don't be shy. Come forward with ideas and proposals. Thank you.
Could I possibly just pose this question, whether it's on pharma or mining or agriculture? One of the frustrations that potential investors have, even if you're going to make a proposal, you've got to make a proposal with some knowledge and understanding as to what they're willing to look at and what they're willing to do and to accept. Do we have any clarity of what we could do, let's say in mining or pharma or agriculture? We hear the big picture. Can we get any more detail? Ambassador?
Right, yep. I think yes, do give us your questions, but Yassine might want to comment on, I mean, I think it's a bit difficult to answer that question in the abstract, but if people have specific areas they want us to follow up, I think you're right, Lady Olga, that there is often a communications gap, and both sides don't know what they don't know, and that's where I think, you know, we can help, the ABBC can help to try and address those sorts of gaps in information. But can I turn to Yassine to see if there's anything specific that he wants to highlight in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is, and I agree, there is a lost in translation process. On one side, people are waiting to be delivered, you know, where do you have needs, and therefore I will build a project around it. And from an Algerian perspective, they don't know where there is needs themselves, yes? I mean, take agriculture, for example. It is estimated that there is around 3 million hectares of arable lands in Algeria that are not being utilized. If someone came with a project of developing agricultural capabilities on the ground, it will be well received, but people have to do some homework. I mean, they have to identify first what they want to do, where their area of technicity. I mean, what works in North Africa or in an African spectrum, what is economically viable, both from a local, domestic and international export consumption, what is en vogue. Let me give you examples. For example, you know, if someone wanted to challenge, take a big challenge, I mean, there is the entire dates business, yes? So with the palms, you can do compressed wood. With palms, you can do, so with dates, you can do sugar. There is already an export and a production, but you know, the packaging of it is not to international standards. There is as well all the industry of transformation of this product that hasn't been properly deployed. There is, I don't know how to say it in English, a figue de Barbarie. It's a cactus fruit that is a viral plant that was brought by the conquistador from Mexico that have spread it across North Africa. The oil generated from the pressurizing the figue de Barbarie is one of the most expensive available edible oil in the world because it has substantial components of vitamins. With the plant itself, and I was watching a program in Mexico recently, you can do plastics that are biodegradable, yes? So there is not a part of Algeria where you don't find these products, very easy to grow. So if someone has an opportunistic, environmental, strategic deployment of plastic, vertical integration of activities, and wanted to have some lands to do it, that will be no issue. But you have to come with the strategy in that specific fashion. Yes, Algeria has a production of tomatoes, most people don't know that is higher than its neighbors. Actually, Algeria produces more tomatoes than France. But we lack of the integrated transformation of the tomato product. So you don't have to know much of the country. You just go to Wikipedia, you will find that Algeria is a mega producer. I can guarantee as well that there is you know, opportunities there in the transformation of tomatoes or potatoes. Algeria have produced excellent of potatoes. So if someone wants to do a chips, to use the proper British word, crisps, factory. There is possibilities to do things of that nature. So I think for entrepreneur, Algeria is quite interesting. There is plenty of things that can be done, but I cannot more than agree with the ambassador is to basically say, don't be shy, come up with your proposal. And if you are short of ideas, please come. I saw that one of the participants corrected me on the name of the product. It's called prickly pear. So not a new word. That was.
Well, thank you, Yassine. I think actually the points that you've been making about us as coming up with ideas and participation and using local support is really critical. Could we possibly turn to two subjects we haven't really explored enough, and that's technology, which of course is much promoted by Lord Risby, who's been very committed to the new technology sphere. And with a bright and savvy new generation, I was wondering whether perhaps Mr. Bouhara and the ambassador, well, the ambassador first and then Mr. Bouhara and then Lord Risby, could have a wrap up on that. Mr. Bouhara?
Yep.
Well, Ambassador, fine, please.
Okay. Sorry.
Technology is so important. It's something we're really strong on.
Yeah. I think it's a really exciting area where, you know, we've seen a lot of capabilities among young Algerians. There was a very interesting event organized recently called Hack Algeria. I don't think it was an instruction. I think it was a sort of idea of a hackathon to identify the most exciting sort of projects from young Algerians. And that seems to have gone really well. I think where there would be complementarity is particularly around how those projects could be commercialized, how you can develop a global market in particular. And that's where the UK has a great strength, that we have a lot of experience and expertise in using technology across global markets. And I think it's also gets back to the point we were discussing just now. I think the kind of the terrain is the space is empty for ideas, particularly around technology, and it's anything that a young, ambitious, mobile population might want. And I think sometimes we, as the UK side, don't appreciate the sorts of things that we do well and are very experienced in that other countries don't. So I'm thinking, for example, of fintech, where we've made huge strides, e-commerce generally, the health tech, ed tech. You know, I think if people step back and think, well, what has the UK developed that's quite exciting over the last few years, there may well be scope for Algeria to sort of benefit from our expertise to kind of leapfrog and develop new markets here and indeed into Africa as well. Thank you.
Lord Risby, as this is a subject very much after your own heart, would you like to add to that?
Yes, just one thing. It's a very curious phenomenon is as a result of this pandemic, we are seeing a technology being deployed in health, which never existed before. And so, for example, you can go online and talk to your doctor now, and it actually is highly acceptable to people. This is not an issue, and doctors are willing to do this. So this is just part of what's happening when, of course, there are pressures on any kind of health service. So that's just one thing. But, you know, it's all very well talking about technology, and it's perfectly true, echoing what the ambassador said. There are 4 tech hubs in the world, and 2 of them in the United Kingdom. And if you look at the investments into the United Kingdom technology sector broadly, it's enormous, and it's doing well. But it does only exist and is supported in the startup sense by appropriate tax and employment policies. And, you know, if you have to change a culture in this regard, if you have a startup culture which involves minimal taxation, minimal bureaucracy, and minimal employment rights, at least, you actually perversely have the effect of increasing the interest. And the reason why so many young people come to London, to Tech City, etc., is simply this. But you have to have those underpinnings, and it does require some sort of bravery on the part of governments that wish to go down this route to actually understand that that is necessary. But I just repeat, the one thing that we have learned in the last few months of this appalling virus is the absolutely essential key part of our lives now being dominated by communications and technology. And any country which is going to want to succeed has to embrace this comprehensively. And we are here to help our friends in Algeria in any way it's possible to share our experience and success, because we know the success in Algeria is already there and we want to help build on it.
Well, thank you very much indeed. As we wind up, sadly, there are many topics I would love to have addressed in detail, but I think the ambassador did suggest that we did some sector-specific subjects. Just one final point that I'd like the ambassador to address. and then Yassine first, is the importance of understanding that the greater part of trade opportunities with the private sector, unless you're a multinational with the government sector. I think somehow there has always been a belief that you must go to the government for trade relationships. I think we need to try and clarify this. So could we begin with Yassine Bouhara and then finish with His Excellency? Yassine.
Sure, Lady Olga. Just not to paraphrase what was already said by others. When you look at the tech business, what I witnessed the most in Algeria is people who want the Holy Grail. They want to be gaining the tender for electronic payment at the country national level. They want to get a mandate by one of the largest banks of the country to become their operator. As much as it is possible, I don't think that this is realistic unless you are a substantial player. Yes, and so for tech entrepreneur to try to tackle something of that nature, I don't think will be a very easy task. Nevertheless, it is a burgeoning type environment. There is plenty of players in the logistical space. There is a lot of e-commerce initiatives that are taken. There is very discreet outsourcing businesses that have exposed. It is true that the government has designed a new regulation, fiscal incentive and benefits for whatever is defined as a startup. I mean, we don't know yet what is the final definition of what is a startup. It doesn't have to be only something of an innovation standpoint or technological. But it is true that the capital market infancy in Algeria makes that there is no proper framework. I saw some questions from some of the participants relating what is the ecosystem. There is no ecosystem. Yes, so this is something that we have to do in a DIY process. Yes, when we set up the vehicle to get the Temtem investment, we had to do an arbitrage of a legal frame to rearrange some sort of a SARL, so a limited company. Yes. And structure a shareholder agreement that looks like a venture capital vehicle because we didn't have the proper legal vehicle to do so. So this is basically, you know, my advice around technology or startup and everything else. There is much more being done than you think, but if your only focus is to gain some sort of a tender to be the one that is going to be the PayPal of Algeria, good luck. But I don't think that this is a realistic objective. And this is where I hear the most frustration. People want to be the, I don't know, I'm going to make a deal with PayPal and become PayPal Algeria. That's not going to work. This is not how it's going to unfold. So I see some dynamism. If you are a small player or an entrepreneur, you may want to talk to the public sector, but I strongly advise you to look at other type of development. I would like just quickly, if you allow me, Lady Olga, in 2 minutes, to answer one question, which I often listen to, the financial situation of Algeria. People say, oh, you used to have 200 billion of cash reserve, now you have only 50. Is the country going to go bust and everything else? I think on the short term, I don't see any issue related to Algeria financial situation. Number one, if you look at the budget of Algeria, the way it has been shrink as well, the fact that the currency is slowly devaluated over time, it is important to keep in mind as well that Algeria used to spend an average of 40 billion of infrastructure a year. Somehow, since oil price collapsed, there is no development of infrastructure of that scale at the moment. Therefore, on the short term, I don't see an issue. Nevertheless, the fact that there is a shortage of deployment of infrastructure will have substantial consequences on the long run if there is not a restart of infrastructural spend. Yes, so from a short-term standpoint, I don't see the issue of the reserve of change as something that is substantially threatening. There is as well a positive payment balance in Algeria that we don't see, because as the remittances from migrants or Algerians from abroad takes place in the informal space, they are not accounted as payment balance. So technically it is estimated, let's take our neighbor Morocco has around 7.5 billion of remittances a year. Algeria has officially 2.5 billion. It is estimated that this number must be closer to 10 or 12 billion due to the size of the diaspora that is abroad. So when you look at the balance of payments of Algeria, you need to add some sort of 8 to 10 billion. And when you do that, suddenly the commercial deficit is absorbed by that specific component. So I'm not going to go into more details into it. I'm not too concerned at this current stage of the financial situation of the country. I'm concerned of the speed at which reforms are done. I'm concerned about the speed at which the diversification of the economy takes place. I'm concerned about the speed at which we reform capital markets, the banking sector, the governance, the speed of the legal framework of the fight against corruption. All of that is a bit too slow, but this is already quite good that it is happening.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed, my good friend Yassine Bouhara. So for the final wind up with His Excellency the Ambassador, when we've gone through such a wide range of topics, what is your wind up advice?
Thanks, Olga. 3 quick points. I think, as Yassine has just touched on, yes, there is pressure, but that is, I think, translating into this determination to reform and to diversify, and that opens up opportunities. Second, just to pick up a point that Lord Risby made, absolutely right about the need to promote innovation, to promote tax reform, regulatory reform, an ecosystem that enables startups to flourish. And that is something that the Algerian ministers recognise, and it's something that I'm pleased to say we are working increasingly closely with them to share our experience in all those areas. And then thirdly, and I suppose this is my answer to your point about advice, I think it's to use us to help you. It's to give us feedback when you come across problems that we can discuss with the Algerian government, which is, in my experience, increasingly open to having that sort of feedback. But it's also to try out your ideas with us. If you have an idea for a project, if you see an opportunity, we will tell you honestly if we don't see it as being viable, if we don't see an opportunity. But if there is an opportunity, we're very keen to work with you to deliver the business. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you very, very much indeed for giving such a wonderful, comprehensive view and advice. And I would like to thank all our registrants in the webinar, which has really been an enormous number, far more than we ever anticipated. We will continue with our work, and I would say to you that the ABBC is willing and happy to support you in your endeavors in Algeria. We have an operating office in Algiers with a country manager, Maya Boumediene. We are there to serve you, and we're happy to engage in detailed discussions with you after the webinar. But may I give a heartfelt thank you to His Excellency the Ambassador, to Lord Risby, and to Yassine Bouhara. Goodbye to you all. Thank you.